Well, on this day in Congress, we saw things that we've never seen before. In the Senate, we saw a 51-48 vote to confirm an assistant attorney general to head the criminal division of the Justice Department, which supervises all of the federal prosecutors in the country. And votes to confirm assistant attorneys general to that post are usually not close. They are usually overwhelmingly bipartisan because the nominee is usually a recognized professional with significant experience as a federal prosecutor. But this was the first time we saw the Senate confirm someone to that job who has never been a federal prosecutor or a local prosecutor, and in fact has never appeared as a lawyer in federal court, has never tried a case in federal court. That was a uniquely Trumpian appointment, the likes of which we have not seen before. And in the House of Representatives today, we saw something with elements of something that we have seen before, something disturbing. Former Republican Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, got in trouble late in his career because of his days as a high school wrestling coach. He was caught paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy the silence of a man who said he was sexually abused by Dennis Hastert in those days when he was a coach. And today, another wrestling coach is in trouble in the House of Representatives. Congressman Jim Jordan is trying to convince the House of Representatives and his constituents in Ohio that the wrestlers that he used to coach are now lying about him. 8 former wrestlers from Congressman Jordan's days as a wrestling coach at Ohio State University say that they complained directly to him about sexually aggressive behavior and, in some cases, molestation by the wrestling team's Dr. Richard Strauss. And Republican House members who remember what happened to Dennis Hastert have to be worried tonight about what the future might hold for Republican Congressman Jim Jordan. But also today in Congress, there were glimmers of sanity. And these days, glimmers are about the most we're going to get. Glimmers in both the House and the Senate. And it is the second day in a row that we have seen a demonstration of sanity in the United States Senate. Yesterday's 97-2 Senate vote to essentially rebuke President Trump's rhetoric about NATO was led by the senior Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, who will be our first guest here tonight. Today, another vote to rebuke the president's policy, this time on tariffs, was led in the United States Senate by Republicans. And it was supported by all Democrats in an 88-11 vote against the president's policies on tariffs. Now, the House of Representatives tends to work in stranger and often more invisible ways than the relatively open proceedings that you can watch on the Senate floor. And so there isn't much to show you in the way that the House rebuked the president today for his reckless and false language about NATO. Last night at this hour, we showed you Jack Reed's speech on the Senate floor, specifically attacking what President Trump has said about Vladimir Putin and arguing in favor of what was Senator Reed's resolution to, quote, reaffirm the commitment of the United States to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization alliance as a community of freedom, peace, security, and shared values, including liberty, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Senator Reed's resolution got only 2 opposing votes from Republicans Rand Paul and Mike Lee, who sometimes call themselves libertarians. A similar resolution in the House of Representatives today was actually passed unanimously. Not one vote cast in support of the president's rhetoric in the House of Representatives today. And like the resolution in the Senate yesterday, the House resolution was sponsored by a member of the seemingly powerless Democratic minority, Congressman Steve Cohen of Tennessee. But you would never know that, even if you're watching the House floor very closely today, because as I said, as you'll see in a moment, the House acts in mysterious ways. Steve Cohen's resolution expresses, quote, support for the countries of Eastern Europe and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The resolution says that the House of Representatives, 1, condemns any threat to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, freedom, and democracy of the Baltic states. 2, condemns the clear, gross, and uncorrected ongoing violation of the Helsinki Principles by the Russian Federation with respect to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. 3, supports keeping United States sanctions imposed against Russia relating to Crimea in effect until Ukraine's sovereignty over Crimea has been restored. But You didn't hear any of that in the House of Representatives today because the Republican floor manager of what was going on in the House today, Ed Royce, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, introduced the resolution as a unanimous Foreign Affairs Committee voted resolution this way.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, unanimous consent that the Committee on Foreign Affairs be discharged from further consideration of House Resolution 256 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 256, resolution expressing support for the countries of Eastern Europe and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Is there objection to the consideration of the resolution?
And there was no objection. And I told you there wasn't going to be much to see here. And because there was no objection, that means that that resolution passed the House of Representatives unanimously. And that happened after the president engaged in a public argument about NATO, in which, in his desperate attempt to win the argument, he did what he always does when he's desperate. He lied.
Germany, as far as I'm concerned, is captive to Russia because it's getting so much of its energy from Russia.
As the New York Times correctly pointed out immediately after that, President Trump is wrong. The Germans now get only about 9% of their energy from Russia, not the 70% that Mr. Trump claimed. And joining us now is Democratic Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island. He is the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. And Senator Reed, I wanted to ask you about how easy and how hard was it for you to achieve what you did yesterday on the Senate floor, getting 97 votes on the Senate floor in what was essentially a rebuke of President Trump's rhetoric about NATO?
Well, we have the opportunity on the Senate floor to speak, and we were able to do that. Senator Menendez, Senator Durbin, Senator Murphy, Senator Schumer, and I think it was the arguments, but more than that, beyond a rebuke, it was an affirmation of our support for NATO, our recognition of its role in defending the United States over many, many decades. Also, recognition of the rule of law as a guiding principle in international relationships. And finally, asking the president to do what we asked last year in the defense bill, give us a report on the malign activities of Russia that's going on today. And what we got was a response, a bipartisan response, but it really wasn't about party. It was about this country, about representing our constituents, and about standing up for what we've stood up for decades. So it was a very satisfying, and I think it started a chain reaction, as you pointed out today, where the House felt they had to also do something like that. And hopefully it'll be a good counterpoint to what the president is doing in NATO, and we can move forward rather than retreat.
I saw that Senator McConnell actually voted on your side yesterday, but I wondered, did he put up any kind of roadblocks for you ahead of time on trying to do this?
No, we've had a very, very cooperative debate and process with the defense bill. That's tradition. And then part of it, as I think, goes back to Senator John McCain, his inspiration. And even today, he's inspiring us with his conduct. And even before John, with John Warner and Carl Levin and many, many people. But this has been a very bipartisan process. And so when we indicated that we bring the resolution to the floor, the instruction of the conferees, there was no opposition. In fact, Senator Inhofe, my counterpart, the chairman or acting chairman, was supportive. So again, I think you saw yesterday people not talking about party, but talking about principle and making sure that the world understands we support NATO, we affirm our support for NATO.
And Senator Reed, your reaction to the way you saw the president representing the United States today at the NATO summit?
I think it's not helpful at all. In fact, I think it is ironically, perhaps merely coincidentally, doing what Vladimir Putin's been doing for many years now, which is trying to undermine NATO, trying to disparage NATO, trying to disparage one of its principal members, Germany. Also trying, Putin has been, to lower the prestige and the moral influence of the United States in Europe and around the world. So this is not helpful, particularly as he approaches his meeting with President Putin. I think a unified NATO, one that is committed to the shared values of freedom, of opportunity for its citizens, and a peaceful world is much more effective than disparaging a country, one member, or all the members of NATO.
I was looking at comments by former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright today, talking about the things Donald Trump was saying about NATO 2 years ago and condemning that language 2 years ago. As this continues and as the rhetoric seems to increase, do you or other senators fear that the president might be trying to get the United States to actually leave NATO?
Well, that would be a catastrophic situation. NATO has been our front line of defense. We're there for our protection. This is not something gratuitous activity on behalf of the Europeans. They're the front lines. I would rather, frankly, be confronting Russia with forces there than not be there and have Russia influencing Europe. That would be detrimental, not only detrimental, as I said, catastrophic. So again, I think that these proposals to withdraw troops, et cetera, it not only would hurt us, but it just ignores the commitment and the contribution that NATO is making. For the first time, the Article 5 was invoked when we were attacked on 9/11. That was the European community coming to our assistance. European forces, NATO forces, have been with us in Afghanistan. They've lost personnel there. They've died along with our soldiers there, and sailors and Marines and airmen. They are with us in Iraq, helping to train Iraqi forces. They are in the Baltic countries as a tripwire to prevent another Crimea happening in the Baltic, where a hybrid operation by the Russians takes out one of our NATO members. This is a real commitment, and their increased spending after 2014 particularly is significant, about $87 billion. So disparaging NATO is I think a mistake. Leaving it would be a catastrophe.
Senator Reid, quickly before you go, did you hear any grumblings in the cloakroom or anything from Republicans that wouldn't have been on their microphones about being afraid of voting as they did yesterday in the Senate in what was essentially a rebuke of the president's rhetoric? Not at all.
No, again, I think they approached it as senators, as representatives of their constituents, as what was the right thing to do rather than what was the most convenient thing to do. And that, I think, accounts for the 97-2 votes. And in fact, I think both Senator Paul and Senator Lee have a consistent record of not being supportive of international organizations. So I think they felt, too, in principle, they were taking the vote that they should take.
Senator Reid, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.